Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to finish our scholarly examination of Alien Worlds, the sci-fi anthology comic from the 80s, edited and mostly written by Bruce Jones. This issue came out in 1988. This is a special graphic novel that Eclipse put out. Not much of a graphic novel, it's pretty thin. It's 48 pages, but I assume Eclipse had some stray Bruce Jones stories lying around, and they figured they'd put this out. Because this came out about 3 years after the very last Alien Worlds, which we looked at like 5 episodes ago, number 9. And it's nice to see that in this issue, he writes all the stories. He was like phasing out as the primary writer in Alien Worlds near the end, but these are all written by him. That's not always the best thing. There's a couple clunkers, it's bound to happen. It's an anthology, you can't always bat 1,000. But a lot of it, even the clunkers are pretty interesting because, Bruce Jones is an interesting writer. But man, what a way to start off, though. We got a beautiful William Stout cover. And I don't think William Stout ever did a cover that wasn't beautiful. I mean, every cover I've ever seen by him is just phenomenal. It's just such a perfect style. Such a great artist. Really nice stuff. So the very first story is called Phony Express. And breakdowns by Tom Enriquez. And more importantly, the finishes are by Tom Yeats and Mark Johnson. Because this looks like Tom Yeats' art to me. He pretty much overpowers Enriquez's breakdowns. I kind of remember Tom Enriquez from the 80s. He did some stuff for Eclipse, maybe some other independent publishers. He had a kind of cartooniness to his serious art, which I kind of liked. But I don't see any of that in here. This is pretty much, looks like a Tom Yeats story. So this story kind of reminds me of like James M. Cain or something. These people down on their luck, really down on their luck, and they got no hope. So our protagonist here is this dude who has moved to this planet with his young bride. He's totally in love with her, and he's totally failed. He can't find a job. They're slowly starving. They're broke as hell. And he's so desperate and just hopeless that he's got a gun, and he plans on shooting his wife while she's asleep and then killing himself to spare her, I guess, the miserable future that awaits her, married to a guy who can't provide for her. Kind of stupid, But I think people thought like that in older times, And he's about to shoot her, and then she wakes up, and he loses his nerve, of course, and just like tells her he was cleaning his gun. So she says, "So are you gonna look for work today, honey?" And she's not nagging him, but every day she exhorts him to find work, almost like because she has faith in him. It's kind of this loving thing of like, "Honey, I know you can do it. Today's the day. You'll definitely find some work. I have faith in you." So he sets out. Of course, just like every day, nobody's hiring on this shit planet. There's no jobs. But then as he's walking by the post office, one of the employees is yelling at the postmaster and saying, "This job's too damn dangerous. I quit. I've had enough of this shit." So our hero runs in and says, "Hey, it looks like you got a job opening." And he says, if you want, I mean, it's a really dangerous job. You got to deliver this mailbag about 100 miles to Silver City. And you're going to be going through swamp men territory. There's going to be lots of crazy, scary creatures who are going to attack you. But if you want the job, and he's thrilled. He doesn't care about the risks. He's just like, finally, I got a job. I'll be able to take care of my wife. As soon as he leaves, he's instantly attacked by all manner of crazy alien creature. I like this weird-looking dude. It's a giant snake attacks him. But he prevails against all of them. He's just so full of fire. He wants to succeed because he only gets paid if he delivers the bag. So he's very incentivized. The swamp men attack him. He escapes them by the skin of his teeth. And then when he's almost at Silver City and a tornado strikes, he ties himself to this tree. His ostrich-like steed is blown away. He loses him. And when he finally gets to Silver City, the post office is leveled. And he looks in the bag and is like, only one letter in this whole pouch. And he says the handwriting looks familiar. And he opens up the letter, and it's from his wife to her lover in Silver City. Apparently, she's been having this affair with this guy for a while. And she's even saying how, I can't wait till my husband finds some work, and then we'll have more time to meet each other because he'll be at work, you know? So he goes to the address of the lover, and he's dead. He was killed in the storm. So then we go back to, he's back at his house, and he sees his sleeping wife. And it's the exact same dialogue from the first panel. This is every man's worst nightmare. This is a trap from which there is no escape. It's better this way. You level the gun. You wonder if you have the guts to pull the trigger. And we're just left to guess what he's going to do. I'm kind of sure in my mind what he's going to do. But man, pretty film noirish. Oh. So now we have Looking for Louie with art by the great Ralph Reese. Just classic, great cartoonist. Wish he did more in comics. He didn't do much. So this is kind of a goofy one. This is like a funny one. You can tell even by the goofy logo. And we see these two spacemen from Earth. They're going out into space because this guy, he wants to find like some primitive, exotic alien bride. You know, his buddy Carmine is saying, "What's wrong with Shirley Bernstein? She's got great legs." And he says, I don't intend to spend the rest of my life in some roach nest in the Bronx trying to make ends meet with Shirley. I want something more, exciting from life. So the first word they find, right off the bat, they see these beautiful women frolicking in this pond. And they land, and when the women come out of the water, they're centaur women, so they have the body of horses. So he's just like, Louis, that's his name, sorry, Louis. Louis is like, this isn't what I wanted. The centaur men arrive and start shooting arrows at him, so they hightail it out of there. Next planet, he sees this beautiful naked woman picking flowers. And she seems very friendly to him. But then all of a sudden, these other women come out with spears, and they're cannibals. So they're taking them to the stew pot where they're going to cook them. And Louis hits the remote switch on the rocket, and the rocket arrives and scares off the cannibal women, and they escape. This is just such an excuse for Bruce Jones to indulge in his love of cheesecake, and Ralph Reese. It is interesting, there's so many topless women in this comic. Their breasts are all exactly alike. They're like photocopies of each other. They're like just these perfect, flawless fantasy breasts, and every single woman's got them. So Carmine's kind of like, yeah, maybe I should just go home. But then he sees a rocket that has crashed on this other little planet, on a planetoid. There's this beautiful woman, half-dressed, of course. And he kind of comes on to her. He's just like, come here, baby. And he grabs her. And it turns out she's a robot. She falls apart in his hands. Spring. So he's like, fuck it. Let's go. And as they fly into the Earth's atmosphere, we see New York City. It's post-apocalyptic. A lot of the buildings are like half demolished. The Brooklyn Bridge is sinking into the Hudson. And as they get to the landing pad, Shoily's there. And look, she's a roach woman, and they're roach people. So, obviously there's been nuclear war, or many nuclear wars, and now the roaches have taken over. And that's why he was mentioning the roach nest. Kind of goofy, but also kind of fun. Their dialogue's kind of funny, their little Bronx accents, Seeing that in science fiction is a little different. This next one's Boots and Jackets, drawn by Eric Shanower, guy who did the Bronze Age for, 100 issues or so. Really, really good artist. I don't know if he's still drawing, but he was all over the 80s and 90s. He even did mainstream stuff for DC and stuff. But this is pretty nice stuff. Not very stylized, just a very old school, detailed cartoonist. So we see this kind of crazy action sci-fi scene, but the dialogue is a husband and wife kind of bickering. And the wife is basically like, you gotta watch this again? Why can't you watch the news sometimes? And the husband is all like, the news is boring, just like the climate-controlled weather. Everything here is boring and predictable. So as we pull back, we realize, we see his big screen TV. This husband is watching his old adventures. He used to be a ranger. And in this sci-fi scenario, rangers were the guys who would kind of fly into a planet and tame it, They'd kill all the scary predators and creatures, and then civilization could come in and, make everything shiny and nice and predictable. So he hates the world that he's helped created. He misses the old days so much. He's totally living in the past. He hates how everything's plastic and everything's safe and there's no more beautiful jungles. Everything's paved over, concrete. His wife's just like, you gotta stop living in the past. This is ridiculous. What's wrong with security and, having a nice, comfortable life? On the TV, we see this creature called an ern, one of the most beautiful and deadly creatures in the galaxy. And he's like, what I would give to ride one of those again. So he goes out. He's going to get a drink. And as he enters the bar, they're kicking out this drunk. And it turns out he knows him. It's one of his old compatriots in the Ranger Corps. And they have some drinks together. They commiserate. They're both kind of sickened with the way things are. They miss the old days of, adventure and danger. They talk about, he asks the drunk guy about Mathers. He says, you always had a thing about that Mathers guy. Because I guess him and Mathers were like the two best Rangers. So they had this rivalry going. They, the whole time they were Rangers, they were always vying for who was the best. And then this brawl breaks out in the bar. And our hero is having a great time. He's like, yahoo! I haven't done this in years. Had some crazy fun, So they go off carousing in the night, getting drunker and drunker. The next day, well, it's early in the morning, it's late at night, he gets a call. Scott, I'm sorry, his name's Scott. He gets a call from the government, and they're like, hey, we haven't done this in a while, but we found a new planet, and we're clearing it out. But there's a reg here destroying government property, halting construction. So a reg is basically what they call renegades. When they would land on a planet and try to exploit it and tame it, some of the natives didn't go along with it, and they'd fight. They were basically rebels. So they're like, we got this reg here, and we can't stop him. He's costing us millions of dollars a day. Can you put on your old uniform and one last job? We'll give you 1 million credits. So he's thrilled. And he just ditches his wife and heads out there. Of course, she does not like this idea at all. Because he's an old guy now. So he lands on the planet and he's tracking the reg. And there's all these traps, these deadly traps the reg set for anyone who pursues him. He realizes that he's not as young as he used to be, and he's like, he even gets attacked by this giant, like, swamp dragon. I like the design on that. He even says, and to think I used to miss all this. So he falls into this tiger trap, and the reg comes out. It's Mathers, his old rival. And he basically tells him, just like Scott has been thinking, he's like, I'm so sick of this sanitized world we live in. I found this little untamed private little paradise, this little planet. But then the Federation found it too. And so I've been trying to sabotage their attempts to ruin this planet and make it another sanitized world. So then Mathers gets swept up in this little trap. And I guess Scott set a trap for him. So he doesn't kill him or take him in. He actually frees him and says, go back to your jungle. I'll tell him I didn't find you. And then an urn comes out. And of course, Scott is just like, what? You're riding an urn? And Mathers says, yeah, there's a small herd of them near my treehouse. You should see it. It's fucking gorgeous. I got a beautiful stream, wild orchids. It's paradise. And then we see Scott kind of thinking, weighing his options. I don't like the way this is drawn. He looks like he's trying to take a shit. It doesn't look like the expression that should be on his face. But we realize the decision he makes because he follows Mathers to his treehouse. And Mathers says, staying for supper? And he says, I'll gather the wood. So apparently he's just going to ditch his life and his wife and play Tarzan with Mathers. This one's called In the Meadow with art by Mike Dringenberg. I don't know what happened to that guy. Did a lot of stuff for Eclipse in the 80s, but his claim to fame was he inked the very first issue of Sandman, maybe the first few issues. So he's probably been living high in the hog on the royalties of those graphic novels all this time. Maybe that's why we haven't seen him. He doesn't need to do anything ever again. And he had an interesting style, definitely different than most, and you'll see. It's pretty good, though. I like his stuff. We see this woman and her dog just kind of having a nice day in a meadow near a pond. And meanwhile, these two aliens are observing her. They're hovering in the Earth's atmosphere, I guess, or beyond it. And this alien is dying of a fatal disease. But his friend is exhorting him to, like, hey, you still have to it's your duty to attain a hunting trophy as a Norphite. You know, this is a manhood ritual. Even though you're dying, you got to do this. Everyone does it. And he obviously doesn't care. He's like, I'm dying. I don't care about a trophy. But his friend's like, here, let me give you another injection. Just do this. You got to. You know, it's our tradition. So we cut back to the woman and her dog. And the dog is sniffing around the forest. And he comes upon this really angry critter, just kind of hissing at him. So the sick alien beams down and tells the woman his plan. I guess he's got a universal translator or something. We cut away for a second to see that the dog is fighting this angry critter. And this woman is pleading for her life. She's like, why do you have to kill me? There must be something useful on this planet you could take instead. Why a corpse? And he basically says, this is just our tradition. I have to do this. And then all of a sudden, the dog comes out of nowhere and bites him on the arm and knocks him over. The alien kills the dog with his laser gun. And she says, go ahead, you killed my best friend, finish me off too. That way you'll have 2 trophies, do it. And he finally realizes he doesn't want this at all, and he walks away. Back in the spaceship, his friend is like, you just walked away without retrieving either of them? And he's like, please, Flan, I'm tired. It's time for my injection. And when he's about to give him his injection, he looks in this microscope and he says, Glyph, it's a miracle. The disease, it's in remission. You're totally cured. What happened on that planet? And then we see this guy calling up the woman. She says, this is Dr. Weldon from the animal clinic. I took the liberty of letting a local student do an autopsy and salivary test on your dog. Did you know he was rabid? So I guess that dog got rabies from that little critter. And then when he bit the alien, I guess rabies to these aliens is like a cure-all for this, or at least a cure for this horrible disease. So pretty interesting little flip there. This one's a weird one. Jupiter Rising, Art and Colors by Bill Wray. And we've seen Bill Wray a bunch of times on this channel before. Really big fan of his cartooning, his drawing. He did Hellboy Jr., was one of the artists on Wasteland, the anthology. He also did Big Blown Baby in the 90s. That was a really fun one from Dark Horse Comics. But I think his probably the thing he'll be remembered for is he worked on Ren and Stimpy as an animator. So this guy just crashed into a police car. They pull him out of the car. He's buck naked and he's drunk as hell. And he seems to be very just kooky. He's very nonchalant about his predicament. He's not like, oh, he seems fucked up. He's drunk. And the police are questioning him. And they're like, so you went on a hunting trip with your cat? And he's like, yeah, I hunt rabbits with my cat. That is my cat hunts. I just watch and take pictures. And he says, you and your cat always hunt at night? He's like, no, we started at 8 in the morning. He says, you said you were only out for an hour. It's been dark for 5 hours, Mr. Hatch. That's his name. He says, yeah, that confused me too. Also the fact that it's so blamed cold in the middle of August. And they tell him that, Mr. Hatch, this is the 21st of November. So he's obviously had some kind of time loss. We don't know what the hell's going on. Also, his address doesn't match up to any known address at all in the town. And his phone number doesn't match up. So this guy's just a total mystery. He keeps asking about his cat, Jupiter. And he says, oh, well, he's a great tracker. He'll probably find me. He always comes home to me. So they take him down to the station. They call up a doctor from the mental institution, obviously, because he seems nuts. And he starts questioning him. And he's just talking nonsense and gobbledygook. He's telling him that, yeah, I started out my trip in a 68 Mustang, but then it turned into a 1940 Mercury. And then I was driving a 1934 Ford Roadster. So it's just like, what the hell's going on with this guy? So he tells the doctor his story and we find out what happened. So that morning, he was heading out. Kind of looks like it's the desert. And him and his cat. And all of a sudden, they go and drive into this mist. And when they come out, they see a tiny horse. And all of a sudden, it's like they're in a swampy jungle. And he's like, what? We're in Nebraska. There's no swampy jungle in Nebraska. He looks up in the sky, sees a pterodactyl. And then Jupiter, the cat, runs off. So as he's chasing his cat, he realizes he sees more dinosaurs. He sees a brontosaurus. He's like, oh my God, I'm back in the Jurassic Age. At first, he's kind of excited. Takes out his camera. He's like, oh my God, I'm going to have the only picture of a living dinosaur. Until he sees a triceratops staring at him. But then this T-Rex comes out of the brush and attacks the triceratops. So he was terrified, but all of a sudden he's like Oh, I can take another picture. And all of a sudden, his camera is like some old-timey camera. It's changed. He finally finds Jupiter, and they run back to the car, and he can't find his car anywhere, but he does find this T-Bird, an old T-Bird. And as he's driving, the car changes again. His clothing changes. He's wearing this old straw boat hat, whatever they called them. And he reaches in the glove compartment, see what's in there, and this brandy. So he starts drinking the brandy. That's how he got drunk. And then he drives back into the mist, and when he comes out, that's where the story began. As he comes out of the mist, he runs right into this police car. So now we're back in the present, and the doctor from the mental institution is like, that's a very interesting story. It's a pity you dropped your camera with the dinosaur photos. But basically, he's like, you're nuts. And you're probably going to spend a lot of time at the cracker factory. But then as he's leading him away, he hears a scratching at the door. And Mr. Hatch is like, Jupiter, that's Jupiter. I'd know a scratch anywhere. I told you it'd find me. And when they open the door, Jupiter is now some saber-toothed cat of some sort. So it kind of proves his story in a weird way, but it's also just like crazy. It's one of those stories. It's kind of silly, you know, the trick ending, but man, I was just so intrigued. Like, what the hell's going on? When I was reading this last night, he really sets up this great quandary throughout the story where you're like, what is going on with his car changing? It doesn't really explain it, but just some kind of crazy time dilations are happening. So this last story is called Worlds Apart. Art and colors by Bob Fingerman. Really like the art in this, and the colors are really nice. I'm not a big fan of Bob Fingerman. He does that minimum wage, or he did that minimum wage comic for a long time for Fantagraphics. But I like this one because he's drawing these like alien frog people. So there's no humans in this. And I think I never liked the way he drew people. So this looks really fun to me. It's almost like I would love to see him draw a funny animal comic after reading this comic. So we have this main character, Grok. He's a sad old man, kind of a dotard, and he's on a trip through space with his son and his son's wife. And he feels like a third wheel. He misses his wife. His wife died in an accident when they were traveling through space. Grok and his wife crashed the ship or something, and she died. So he's just a sad old man, and, you know, he's got no hope for the future. His life's pretty much over. His son's a good kid, though. And he's like, Pop, what are you doing up so late? Are you okay? Thinking about Mom? And we kind of realize, too, that the daughter-in-law doesn't like him. The fact that he's on the trip in the first place. And, you know, he's dotarded. So he's sometimes can be a little annoying because he's senile. And when he gets back to bed, his wife is kind of bitching like, your father shouldn't drink so much coffee. She obviously, you know, doesn't like him. Not a fan. So in the morning, the father, Grok, tells his son, he says, hey, I changed our course. So there's this little planet I want to show you guys. And he's like, Dad, this is her ship. You're already skating on thin ice with her. I don't think she's going to like that. You know, you fucking around with the ship controls. And the wife wakes up and she's mad. And kind of even brings up his Grok's wife's death. He's like, yeah, see? Isn't that how the accident with your mother occurred? Weren't you attempting to land on an alien world? And Grok's son is like, come on, Farrah, for God's sakes, don't bring that up. And Grok gets so angry with her, you know, yelling at him, he whumps the panel with his fist, and that makes the ship crash. So luckily they survive the crash. and they land on this planet. Look at this guy here. I think he cut out a photo. That looks like photo reference. Not reference, I'm sorry, a full-on photo. Maybe it's not, though. Maybe it's some tricky airbrush thing, but it looks kind of neat. So it's not a bad accident. The ship, the son realizes he can repair it in a few hours. But while he's distracted with this, and his wife kind of bitching about his father, he takes off. He just wanders off. And he comes upon a frog, a real frog, a dumb, stupid, earth frog. And he doesn't get it. He's kind of senile, So he's talking to her. And he says, "My name's Grok. What's your name?" And of course, this frog just says Ribbit. So he thinks her name's Ribbit. He says, "What a lovely name." And it seems like he kind of has a little crush on her. Meanwhile, the son and the daughter-in-law are like out searching for him. Grok is just totally like spilling his guts to her, just telling her all his history and his past. And of course, she's a dumb frog. She doesn't know what he's talking about. And he says, "I have to get back, Ribbit. They'll be worried about me. Will you make an old man happy, my dear? Will you kiss me once?" Sorry. All of a sudden, Ribbit gives birth to she lays a bunch of eggs. He's like, "Ribbit, what have you done, my darling? You've laid your eggs. You want me to fertilize them?" Meanwhile, the son and the daughter-in-law almost get killed by this crocodile, but they kill it with their space weapons. And then when we cut back, Grok is smoking a post-coital cigarette, and he seems pretty happy with himself. He says, "That was wonderful, darling. I'll take that memory with me wherever I go." So he makes his way back to the spaceship where the son and the daughter-in-law are waiting for him. And he says, "Guys, I think I'm going to stay. I found someone." And he tells his son he loves him. And when he goes back to the lily pad where Ribbit was, she's gone. So he's following her scent trail. And he comes upon this Acme Novelty Factory, Georgia's finest gifts. And he makes his way inside, and he sees all of these novelty frogs. I don't think they do this anymore because it's kind of disgusting, but they used to take frogs and stuff them and kind of shellac them and put them in funny positions like they were doing human things like playing golf. Or in this case, he finds Ribbit, and they dressed her up in a cocktail dress, and she's drinking a martini at a table, and a waiter is there serving her another stuffed frog, Grok is so dotarded, he doesn't even realize that she's dead. He's just talking to her. He's like, "Oh, what a lovely restaurant. And waiter, I'll have a drink as well." What a dummy. I like this in the foreground. We see the can of shellac. But he tells her, he says, "I just wanted to come back and speak to you one more time. It's not easy what I have to say. I realize I have to go back to my world because it would just be running away from my life. I've been hiding behind the excuse of my dead wife, blaming myself for my own unhappiness. You taught me tonight in that glade that I'm not too old to start again, to be happy again. So I have to go back." And he gives her a farewell kiss. He says, "Watch the stars tonight, beloved. You'll see one brighter than all the rest, streaming into the heavens." So he walks back to the spaceship. Of course, the daughter-in-law is pissed off. She's like, "Oh, coming back here with no explanation, tracking mud all over the spaceship." And the son's all like, "Shut up, Farah. Just help me start the engines. Leave my dad alone." And I love this last panel. We see Ribbit's dead eye looking up at the spaceship flying off into the night. I kind of like that story, like using science fiction just to tell like a really sweet, sad story about this old guy. I like when science fiction is used for that, just telling a human story. is annoying as hell. The back cover doesn't have some nice art on it. Total waste of real estate. I think this was rushed out. This seems kind of like a rush job, especially all these wasted pages here. I don't know if you've noticed. Having just a blank page, it's just like, come on. So it's really only like 43 pages, this graphic novel. So that's it, guys. That's it for Alien Worlds. And I was going to continue and do all of the Bruce Jones edited anthologies from the 80s, like Pathways to Fantasy and Twisted Tales. But I think I'm going to do those later. There's a lot of anthology series I want to show off and get to. And Twisted Tales is pretty much more the same, except it's horror. So, I don't know, a couple hundred videos from now, I'll do a nice run on Twisted Tales. But I hope you enjoyed them. And it was a lot of fun for me looking at these. I know, like most anthologies, there's going to be a clunker here and there. But for the most part, I really like Bruce Jones's writing, even when has a stupid, goofy twist ending. It's still, the ride getting there is fun because he writes well. And he really knows how to draw you in to his crazy, sci-fi ideas. But I guess that's it for Alien Worlds. And as I said, I hope you enjoyed them. So, and also, I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.